Parliament has just voted on one of the most sweeping housing reforms in decades, and the fallout from that vote will reshape how millions of people in the UK rent and manage property. Whether you own one flat, rent with roommates, or are trying to find a student housing for next term, what just happened in Westminster matters more than most people realise. The Renters' Rights Bill was supposed to be a step toward fairness, protection and balance between landlords and tenants. But after last night's vote, many fear the law will do the opposite, tightening supply, pushing rents even higher, and driving good landlords out of the market entirely. The legislation sped through Parliament faster than almost any housing bill in recent memory. Committees flagged problems, economists warned of side effects, landlords and tenant groups alike called for more consultation. Yet the government kept its foot on the gas. By the time the final debate arrived, this was Parliament's last opportunity to make adjustments that could stop the policy from backfiring. They had the evidence, the data, and the testament. They knew what happened when similar rules were tested elsewhere, and they still voted down almost every amendment that could have made the system workable. One of the clearest examples of how out of touch the decision-making has become is the pet deposit rule. MPs were asked to approve a small change that would have let landlords request up to 3 extra weeks' rent as a deposit when tenants move in with pets. It wasn't a requirement, just an option, an incentive that could make it easier for animal owners to find homes while protecting landlords from damage risk. But Parliament struck it down completely. Under the new framework, landlords will no longer be able to advertise no pets, yet they're also forbidden from taking a higher deposit to cover the potential costs. On paper, it looks progressive. In practice, it creates a minefield. Landlords will quietly avoid applications from pet owners. Tenants will waste time applying for properties they'll never get. And the end result is a market that pretends to be inclusive, while actually becoming less so. This same pattern plays out across other parts of the bill. Take student housing. Large houses shared by multiple tenants, HMOS, can still operate on the academic calendar, allowing landlords to reclaim properties each summer to prepare for a new intake. But thousands of student rentals aren't HMOS at all. They're 1 or 2 bed flats rented to pairs or small groups of students. And under this bill, those landlords lose the ability to align their tenancies with the school year. An amendment was proposed to fix that, giving them the right to regain possession at the end of each academic cycle. It was rejected too. Now many smaller landlords will simply stop renting to students. They'll switch to long-term tenants who don't leave every 9 months. The knock-on effects are obvious. Fewer affordable student homes, longer commutes, universities forced to scramble for emergency accommodation. When that shortage hits headlines next summer, MPs will act surprised, even though the warnings were spelled out in black and white. Then there's the 12-month reletting restriction, a clause that borders on absurd. Under the new rule, if a landlord asks a tenant to move out because they plan to sell and the sale later falls through, they can't rent that property again for an entire year. Proposed fix was to reduce that ban to 6 months. Still harsh, but at least survivable. Parliament refused. Imagine owning a flat that's now sitting empty. You're paying the mortgage. The council might charge double tax on empty property. You've lost rent for months and aren't legally allowed to relet the place, even though people nearby are desperate for somewhere to live. That's not consumer protection. It's economic vandalism. The government insists this will stop landlords from pretending to sell just to raise rent, but losing 6 months of income already makes that scam pointless. Instead, the rule punishes legitimate property owners who get caught in slow sales market. The penalty system adds another layer of confusion. Under the bill, local authorities can fine landlords up to £40,000 for breaches, but they don't need criminal level evidence to do it. The standard is now balance of probabilities, meaning someone can lose tens of thousands of pounds based on assumptions rather than proof. That's a civil threshold, not a criminal one, and lawyers have already warned it's open to abuse. The justification given by ministers was that higher standards would make enforcement too difficult. That's basically an admission that the government wants to fine people more easily, even if it means some innocent landlords get caught in the crossfire. What happens next is equally concerning. The Renters' Rights Bill is headed to royal assent, which will make it law. But that doesn't mean everything changes tomorrow. The rollout will be gradual, just like the Leasehold Reform Act that passed over a year ago, but still isn't fully enforced. A few easy to implement items, like the shift from fixed term to rolling tenancies, will arrive quickly. Those are simple administrative changes that don't need new infrastructure. But the central piece, abolishing Section 21 no-fault evictions, will be delayed for years, and that's where the system could buckle. Section 21 currently lets landlords regain possession without proving fault. It's what keeps thousands of disputes out of court. Once it's gone, every single eviction must go through a full legal hearing, complete with paperwork, judges, and evidence. Courts already face months-long delays for basic possession cases. Piling thousands of new claims into that system without new judges or staff is a recipe for paralysis. Even government insiders admit the courts aren't ready. Officials will likely announce temporary postponements or phased implementation, citing the need to hire more tribunal staff. Meanwhile, landlords won't know which rules apply. They'll hold back investments or decide to sell altogether rather than risk being trapped in legal limbo. That exodus is already underway. Surveys show record numbers of private landlords selling their properties. High interest rates, loss of mortgage relief, new licensing requirements, and now the Renters' Rights Bill have made small-scale property ownership more trouble than it's worth. And when landlords exit, supply drops. When supply drops and demand stays high, Rents rise. It's not ideology, it's arithmetic. Yet Parliament behaved as though basic economics had been suspended. Tenants, ironically, will be hit hardest. The average renter isn't lying awake at night fearing a Section 21 notice. They're worrying about finding any flat at all. The biggest crisis in the rental market right now is scarcity. In many parts of the country, there are 10 applicants for every decent property. The Renters' Rights Bill does nothing to fix that imbalance. If anything, it makes it worse by pushing more property owners out of the sector and discouraging new ones from entering. And then in a few months, headlines will start showing the consequences. Student housing shortages, renters with pets facing blanket rejections, empty properties sitting unused because of the 12-month rule, court delays stretching evictions into year-long ordeals. Each new symptom will be treated as a surprise when, in reality, every one of them was predictable. It's especially frustrating because some amendments were genuinely constructive. There were proposals for stronger enforcement against the small percentage of landlords who neglect repairs or engage in harassment. There were ideas to simplify how tenants can challenge unreasonable rent increases. Those would have improved living standards without damaging the market. But by rejecting targeted fixes and replacing them with blanket restrictions, Parliament chose ideology over practicality. What often gets forgotten in these debates is who most landlords actually are. They're not corporate developers or giant real estate fund. Most own 1 or 2 properties. Maybe they inherited a house and rent it out for extra income. Maybe they bought a flat as a retirement investment. These people aren't sitting on vast portfolios. They're everyday workers trying to balance mortgages, maintenance and tax, and they're being regulated as if they were a multinational corporation. Each new fine, restriction or delay makes their position less viable. Some will hold on until their fixed rate mortgage expires, then sell. Others are already listing properties while demand remains strong. The ones who stay will become more selective, choosing only the safest tenants. Anyone with pets, on benefits, or with a non-traditional income will find it even harder to rent. The government's vision seems to be a market where tenants feel secure. But security doesn't come from laws alone, it comes from abundance. When there are enough homes, tenants can choose where to live. When supply tightens, power shifts back to landlords, no matter what the law says. That's the paradox here. A bill designed to empower tenants may end up leaving them with fewer choices and higher costs. This is how slow crises start. First, supply dips slightly, then rents creep up. Then people start sharing smaller spaces or moving farther from city centres. Over time, housing insecurity becomes normal. The Renters' Rights Bill risks accelerating that process by discouraging the very investment that could alleviate it.
Imagine waking up to find that living in your own home could soon mean an annual property tax bill of £43,000. This isn't a distant threat. It's a real proposal for UK homeowners, replacing council tax and stamp duty with a tax pegged to today's soaring house prices. Why is the government ready to risk uprooting retirees and reshaping the entire housing market? The true story of UK homeowners erupt over a £43,000 property tax starts here. For more than 3 decades, the foundation of property taxation in the UK has rested on a system many now consider deeply flawed. Council tax bills are still calculated using property values set all the way back in 1991, a year when the average house price in London was under £100,000. Today, that figure stands above £660,000, yet for millions of homeowners, their tax band remains frozen in time. This disconnect means 2 similar homes, side by side, can face wildly different bills simply because one was revalued or extended after the cut-off, while the other was not. The result is a patchwork of winners and losers, with no relation to current market realities. Stamp duty land tax, introduced in its modern form in 2003, is only paid when a property is bought or sold. Revenue from stamp duty swings wildly with the housing market, leaving local councils and the Treasury guessing how much they will collect year to year. These unpredictable receipts create headaches for public budgets and discourage people from moving, as each transaction triggers a large, one-off payment. Over time, these quirks have combined to produce a system that is not only outdated, but also fundamentally unfair, especially for retirees living on fixed incomes. Calls for reform have grown louder, with think tanks and campaigners pointing to the need for a fairer, more stable approach that reflects the true value of homes in today's market. The proposed property tax for 2025 is designed to replace both council tax and stamp duty with a single annual charge tied directly to the current market value of a home. Under the Treasury's most recent modelling, the core rate would start at 0.5% for properties valued between £500,000 and £1 million. For homes above £1 million, the rate rises to as much as 0.81% per year. Every homeowner would face a minimum bill of around £800, even at the lowest end of the scale. Unlike the old banded system, this tax is strictly proportional. If a property is valued at £600,000, the annual charge would be £3,000 at the 0.5% rate. A home worth £1.5 million would owe £8,100 a year, calculated at the higher rate for value above the £1 million threshold. These rates are not theoretical, they are drawn directly from the Onward think tank's proposals, which have guided Treasury modelling and are cited in government briefings. The new system would apply only to owner-occupiers, not tenants, and would be recalculated each year as property values change. For many, the annual bill would be far higher than their current council tax, and unlike stamp duty, it would not be a one-off payment at purchase, but a recurring cost, year after year. The minimum payment ensures that even lower value homes contribute, but the most dramatic changes hit those in high value areas, especially in London and the South East, where property prices routinely cross the £500,000 threshold. A retired homeowner in Richmond sits at the kitchen table, pension paperwork stacked beside a letter from the Treasury. The numbers are impossible to ignore. A home bought decades ago for less than £250,000, now valued at £6 million, and a projected property tax bill of £43,000 per year. The arithmetic is stark. Pension income under £25,000 can't even cover the tax, let alone living costs. This isn't a story of luxury or excess, but of ordinary people trapped by rising house prices and a system that suddenly demands more than they have. On September 9th, 2025, a confidential Treasury briefing paper detailing the 0.5% to 0.8% levy leaked to the press. Within hours, national headlines carried the £43,000 figure, igniting fear and anger across the country. Digital petitions sprang up overnight. Within days, over 450,000 signatures flooded parliament.uk and change.org as homeowners realised the threat was real and immediate. What began as private anxiety in living rooms turned into a public outcry. Pressure mounted inside Westminster as the property tax backlash spilled into the political arena. Keir Starmer, facing unrest in traditional Labour heartlands, circulated internal memos in October 2025, warning against full-throttle support for the new levy. His advisors highlighted the risk. Pensioners in North London and the home counties, many lifelong Labour voters, could be swept up by a tax designed for a different era. Starmer's public statements grew more cautious, calling for a commission to review the impact on fixed-income retirees and questioning whether regional fairness was truly being served. Fiscal modelling from the Onward think tank, now cited in Treasury discussions, projected a dramatic shift. London councils would transfer at least £1.1 billion more each year to the national government, subsidising services in regions where most homes fall below the £500,000 threshold. In the North and Midlands, the average property is still under £220,000, meaning entire cities would escape the new tax entirely. This deepened the sense of injustice among London's asset-rich, cash-poor homeowners, who saw themselves footing the bill for the rest of the country. Policymakers pointed to Ireland's 2013 property tax as a warning. There, clustering of home prices just below tax bands distorted the market for years. UK estate agents and economists now predicted similar patterns: artificial price bunching, downward pressure on homes near the threshold, and a chilling effect on transactions above it. These precedents suggested the reform risked not just public anger, but lasting damage to the stability and fairness of the UK housing market.
The UK housing landscape is doing something we haven't really seen since the aftermath of the financial crisis, and the consequences are going to reshape who buys, who rents, and who holds onto property over the next few years. While parts of London and the South East are flat or even sliding, large chunks of the North and Midlands are seeing homes snapped up within days, with aggressive offers and multiple bidders circling the same listings. Beneath those headlines sits a quieter, far more dangerous shift. A wall of fixed-rate mortgages is expiring, and hundreds of thousands of households are about to collide with the cost of borrowing they didn't plan for. If you own, rent, or are waiting patiently with a deposit, the choices made in the next 6 to 18 months could protect thousands of pounds, or for the unprepared, vaporize them. Across England and Wales, the market has effectively split in two. On one side, cities like Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield, Newcastle, and parts of Glasgow are buzzing. New listings move quickly. Sensibly priced homes go under offer in a week, and anything beautifully presented can disappear before the second Saturday of viewings. On the other side, in outer London boroughs and more expensive commuter belts, asking prices have been nudged down in grudging steps. Sellers who held out in spring are quietly reducing in autumn, and buyers aren't rushing to meet them halfway. You can see why. A tidy 3-bed terrace in a northern city might still transact around £180,000 to £220,000, while the equivalent space on the fringes of London is £450,000 to £550,000 before you've even paid for a rail season ticket. When mortgage rates are elevated, that gap isn't just psychological, it's a life quality chasm. This isn't lifestyle whimsy, it's arithmetic. Median earnings are higher in the capital, but not enough to offset double-sized loans, higher running costs, and longer commutes. A family in Greater Manchester with a £200,000 mortgage can often live more comfortably, build a cash buffer faster, and still afford childcare or occasional travel, compared with a household in the southeast servicing a £400,000 loan while juggling higher council tax and transport. As buyers internalise those numbers, behaviour changes. In London, stock on the portals has grown markedly, yet completions are down. Owners are testing the market, buyers are selective and disciplined. Stalemate favours the party with time on their side, and right now time is not on over-optimistic sellers' side. Meanwhile, a different clock is ticking. Between now and 2027, roughly 800,000 fixed-rate loans will reset. Many were taken at 1.5 to 2.5% when money was almost free. Rolling off to 5% plus transforms the monthly outgoing. A £250,000 repayment mortgage might have cost around £1,120 at 2%. Reprice that debt at 5% and you're closer to £1,460, about £340 extra every month, over £4,000 a year, before counting energy, food, and transport that are still pricier than 3 years ago. Miss the remortgage window and slide onto a lender's standard variable rate, and you could be staring at 7% or more. £1,750 a month on the same balance. The jump isn't a rounding error, it's the difference between breathing room and budget triage. Households who bought in 2021 to 2022 feel this most acutely. Some stretch sensibly, expecting wages to catch up, or plan to refinance lower later. The later never came. If the numbers don't work on the new rate, those owners become forced sellers. Not because they want to move, but because they need to. That's part of why listings are rising. It's not exuberance, it's necessity. Layered on top is a stark generational divide. A majority of over 60s own outright. For them, higher interest rates are abstract. Under 45s, by contrast, carry most of the mortgage debt. They're also the group raising families, paying for nurseries, or trying to build savings in a high-cost environment. When financing costs rise, this is the cohort that has to adjust the quickest. Cut discretionary spending, take on side work, or make the hard call to sell while there's still equity. Now bring landlords into the picture. The private rented sector is quietly rebalancing. Last year, nearly 1 in 5 landlords sold at least one property, while fewer than 1 in 10 bought. Recent surveys suggest more than 2 in 5 intend to trim portfolios or exit entirely over the next few years. Motivation varies. Some are fatigued by compliance and licensing. Others see net yields eroded by interest costs. Many are watching policy changes that increase friction. The Renters Reform Bill removes Section 21, meaning regaining possession will rely on specific grounds and a court system that's already congested. For professional operators with scale, process and cash buffers, that's manageable. For small accidental landlords, someone who kept a former home as a let, it tilts the risk-reward calculus the wrong way. Holiday let rules are shifting too. From April 2025, the tax advantages that fueled short-term rentals will be pared back. In some coastal towns and city centres, owners are either selling or flipping to standard tenancies. On paper, that might help long-term renters. In practice, many of those properties will be disposed of into owner occupation, reducing rental supply anyway. Hence the paradox. Rents push upward in tight local markets at the same time asking prices in certain sales markets drift down. Fewer landlords means fewer rentals. Fewer rentals means higher rents. Higher rents mean first-time buyers feel squeezed. Unless, of course, those ex-rental homes appear on the sales side at prices that finally make sense. We're already seeing exactly that. Scan the portals and you'll notice a conspicuous share of listings that clearly were rental. Neutral decor, durable flooring, compliant safety kit. In some postcodes, it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 6. Many are decent houses, looked after. in streets served by good schools and transport. First-time buyers with mortgages arranged and deposits in hand are stepping in. Counterintuitively, the landlord sell-off is opening doors for people who were locked out during the frenzy of 2020 to 2022. And yet, the overall market isn't uniformly weak. Certain urban cores are still humming. Investor demand hasn't vanished, it has evolved. Buy-to-let applications actually climbed in early 2025, not because property always goes up, but because a new cohort of disciplined investors is buying on cash flow rather than speculation. Yields of 6 to 7% gross are still achievable in parts of the North and Midlands. In some micro markets, 8% is possible if you're hands-on and buy below the average. The capital looks different. Paying £400,000 for a flat that rents for £1,800 a month is around 5% gross, which might compress to approximately 3% net after maintenance, insurance, service charges, and voids. That can still make sense if you've got a huge equity cushion or a long time horizon, but for a geared investor starting fresh, the numbers up north are more forgiving. First time buyers can use this window too. With transactions down, competition per listing has eased in many southern postcodes, and sellers who need to move are more flexible. Homes marketed at £300,000 6 months ago are now being cut to £285,000 or £280,000. That's not a crash, it's realism. Buyers who separate wants from needs, obtain a robust agreement in principle, and move quickly when a genuinely good property is reduced, can secure outcomes that were impossible 2 years back. One reason headline indices feel calm is that volumes have been so low at points that averages don't react much. Beneath the surface, price discovery is happening through individually negotiated reductions and chain-saving compromises. In a frozen market, price is a conversation, not a number. There's another drag few are discussing loudly, the long tail of help to buy. The equity loan scheme solved deposits, but funneled demand into new builds where developers could charge a premium. Many buyers paid 10 to 15% over what similar second-hand units fetched, then assumed time would take care of the rest. Several years on, some of those flats are worth less than purchase price, especially where supply of near identical blocks kept coming. When those households remortgage, valuations can disappoint, making refinancing harder and trapping owners who can't swallow a crystallized loss. Incentive packages on new launches, free legal fees, contributions to service charge, or gifted deposit now still exist, but those carrots are typically priced in. Anyone eyeing a shiny new unit owes themselves a cold-eyed comparison with recently sold non-new stock nearby. Confidence is the invisible fuel in housing. Many expected a swifter retreat in interest rates. The Bank of England has held steady longer to ensure inflation stays pinned. Lenders, in turn, are cautious, passing on cuts. A subset of would-be movers is waiting for 3.5 to 4% mortgages that may not reappear quickly. That wait and see dampens transactions, and low transactions stretch out periods of indecision. Eventually something gives. Either rates ease enough to thaw activity, or sellers step down to where demand sits. Watch volumes. Rising sales count is often the first sign the market floor is in, long before national price indices pivot. Medium-term forecasts are more constructive than the mood music suggests. Some consultancies see low single-digit national growth in 2025, followed by a steadier climb through 2026 to 2029. Totaling in the low to mid-20s over 5 years. The distribution won't be even. Historically, the North and selected Scottish cities outperform in these phases, while high-ticket southern areas grind rather than sprint. Those projections lean on two assumptions. Wages continue to grow across the period, and the base rate normalizes to somewhere in the 3.75 to 4.5% range, letting mortgage pricing settle around the mid-4s to low 5s for solid borrowers. That's not the 2% era, but it's livable. Yeah, what does all this mean in practical terms? If you're fixed for years and the home suits your life, you can ignore the daily noise. Keep your emergency fund topped up, overpay if your rate permits, and let amortization do its quiet work. If your fix ends within the next 12 to 18 months, act early. Speak to a whole of market broker 6 to 9 months out. Model payments at different rates. Trim unsecured debt where possible. Consider term adjustments only as a last resort. If the numbers remain brutal, selling on your timetable with a clean chain is vastly better than being forced to accept a panic price later. If you rent and are weighing a purchase, build the decision from numbers upward, not pressure downward. In London, taking on £400,000 of debt for a studio you'll outgrow in 2 years may make less sense than remaining a savvy tenant and banking the difference. In Birmingham, Leeds or Nottingham, a sub £200,000 purchase that costs the same as your rent and saves you future rent inflation may be the right strategic move. There is no universal right time, only the right math for your circumstances. If you're a landlord, the question is whether you're running a business or clinging to an era with prudent leverage and properties in resilient rental corridors, near hospitals, universities, logistics hubs, strong bus and rail. Good tenancies remain plentiful. Budget for compliance, licensing, and repairs with a margin of safety. Underwrite deals at a conservative interest assumption. If the spreadsheet only balances with optimistic rates and zero voids, it isn't a deal. it's a wish. If, however, your portfolio throws off cash even after stress testing, the attrition of casual landlords may leave you with stronger tenants and less competition. For investors with dry powder, today's market is about selectivity and patience, not heroics. Hunt for mispriced homes where the seller's problem is timing, not the asset's fundamental. Negotiate on condition you can fix, roof, boiler, kitchen tiredness, not on problems you can't, motorway at the back fence. Favor freehold when possible, and if buying leasehold flats, interrogate service charges, sinking funds, cladding status, and management quality. A cheap service charge today isn't a win if a deferred maintenance wall is coming tomorrow. Policy continues to tug the market in different directions. Selective licensing is expanding in more councils, raising standards, good, while adding cost, pressure. Reforms to holiday lets will reshape certain local economies. Tenant security will improve as courts modernize, eventually. In the meantime, friction increases, and friction always tests weak balance sheets first. The broader structural story is the uncomfortable one, a concentration of equity among older cohorts who benefited from cheaper entry points, lower multiples, or multi-decade compounding, alongside younger cohorts who face high price-to-income ratios and dearer loans. That imbalance shows up in parental gifts, living inheritances, and multi-generational strategies to help first-time buyers. It isn't inherently unfair. Time does what time does, but it requires realism. Either prices stagnate long enough for wages to catch up, policy intervenes to expand supply meaningfully, or mobility patterns continue shifting northwards and outwards as households chase value. None of this screams crash, and none of it whispers boom. What we have is a reshaping phase where capital and people migrate toward affordability, where professionalization replaces hobbyism in the rental market, and where the winners are those who let data, not headlines, steer decision. If you're selling in the south, price where the buyers are, not where your neighbor sold in 2021. If you're buying in the north, don't confuse cheaper than London with good value. Work through rents, yields, tenant demand, and resale depth. If you're remortgaging, be early, be organized, and be realistic about what your budget can bear. Signals to watch in the near term: weekly mortgage product counts and average fixed rate quotes, monthly sales agreed versus new listings, time to sell metrics in your micro market, rental listings in your postcode and how fast they let, and any Bank of England guidance that nudges swap rates. An uptick in transactions paired with stable inventory often precedes firmer pricing by a quarter or two. A continued rise in stock with flat sales points to further soften. The last decade rewarded people who assumed money would stay cheap and prices would keep floating upward. The next few years will reward preparation, patience, and precise underwriting. There are genuine opportunities. Motivated sellers in good streets, ex-rental homes with strong bones, regional cities with diversified employers and universities, but they will accrue to buyers who can move decisively, because they've done the work beforehand. For everyone else, the smartest move might simply be resilience, preserve cash, reduce fragile obligations, and wait for the fog to thin. The market is speaking clearly if you listen. Northern and Midlands demand holding up, southern vendors negotiating, landlords trimming, renters paying more for scarcer options, remortgage cliffs forcing choices that ripple through chains. These are not disconnected facts. They are parts of the same mechanism adjusting to a new cost of money. Read them well, and you'll navigate the turn. Misread them, and the market will do what it always does: transfer money from the impatient to the prepared.